Welcome to Chit Chat Stocks. Before we get into this episode, we want to talk about our friends at Public. Heads up, folks, interest rates are falling, but you can still lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account at public.com. That's a pretty big deal because when rates drop, so can the interest you earn on your investment. A bond account allows you to lock in a 6% or higher yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment grade corporate bonds. So while other people are watching their returns shrink, you can sit back with regular interest payments, but you might want to act fast because your yield is not locked in until you invest. The good news, it only takes a couple of minutes to sign up at public.com. Lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account only at public.com/chit chat stocks.
Welcome to Chit Chat Stocks. On this show, hosts Ryan Henderson and Brett Schaefer analyze businesses and riff on the world of investing. As a quick reminder, Chit Chat Stocks is a CCM Media Group podcast. Anything discussed on Chit Chat Stocks by Ryan, Brett, or any other podcast guest is not formal advice or recommendation. Now please enjoy this episode.
Welcome into Chit Chat Stocks. We have another fantastic interview coming up today with Rihard Jarc, who writes the Uncover Alpha newsletter and is the CIO of New Era Investments. I think maybe New Era Fund, New Era Investments. Either way, we will have the link to his newsletter in the show notes. So go check that out if you are so inclined. And today we're doing a full discussion on Meta platforms, formerly known as Facebook, one of the big technology players, owner of Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Oculus, investing in AI, as Rihard had a recent tweet on, is spending $10 billion on a subsea internet cable. So there's a lot to discuss today. But Rihard, we've talked a while ago, but since the beginning of November 2022, barely 2 years ago, Meta is up over 500% since then. Their stock is up over 500%. I'll just open it with this. Why is it up so much?
Sure. First of all, thank you guys for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on. To start off with the big question, why is Meta up 500% in the last 2 years? In 2022, there was some specifics around this company. When people ask me and I talk about it, I often refer to it as like, the market still being irrational, even if you are the top 10 company in the world. And this is, for me, what happened with Meta, which basically, in 2022, there were multiple of reasons why investors thought that Meta is basically over, from the iOS change. So Apple changed their privacy policy regarding third-party tracking. So Meta and other advertisers, online advertisers, lost signal, which is very important, was even more important at that time for targeting, so for ad targeting. Then you had the rise of TikTok, which was, fueled by everybody staying home, watching, people they don't know, because everybody that didn't do anything in the pandemic, so you were kind of, looking for stuff to watch. So there was that rise of TikTok, and then, also Meta or Facebook at that time, changed their name to from Facebook to Meta, and laid out their grand vision of the Metaverse. And with it also explained to investors that they're going to spend tens of billions of dollars for the next years, which was probably not that well timed, because we were also entering the end of the ZERP era, right? So those all factors combined kind of spiraled into this thinking that Meta is over and they have too much issues and they will not be able to overcome them. And that happened. So all those issues kind of faded away. Meta found their kind of solutions for every problem. What was funny, actually, in December 2022, when the stock was $100, I actually wrote a piece saying Meta short-term paying for long-term gain. And I kind of laid out, that most of their problems can be resolved by them. So we're talking about cost cutting, limiting the spending and stuff like that. And it was the least read article from my newsletter, which was funny because, it shows you that sentiment in the short term really does drive stock prices, and in the long term, the fundamentals take over. So it was a mix of, over negativism from investors as well as Meta executing in the following years greatly so.
Yeah, it's a funny signal. We sometimes have that here where we discuss a stock on the podcast or we do an episode on one and we don't get very many listens, and it just doesn't garner a lot of interest. And for us, it's like we could be onto something here. There might, there's less interest, less people covering it. But I remember specifically that time period writing one of my least timely tweets of all time, and it's a good thing people hopefully don't listen to me, but I said, I think Meta's uninvestable here. I'm pretty sure at rock bottom prices, just absolutely called the trough. And it was exactly for the reason you mentioned, which was the Zuckerberg seemed very focused on the metaverse, and obviously the name change kind of indicated that, and it kind of seemed like there was no limit for a while to what they might spend on the metaverse. They've since reined that in a little bit, it seems, and we're going to talk through some of their efforts here as well. But getting away from the metaverse, getting to sort of their core business, which is the family of apps, we want to go through and get updates on, I'm putting this in air quotes here, the legacy units of the business, because they might sound like legacy units, but they still seem to be growing. So why don't we start with kind of the namesake, or the original namesake, Facebook, anything Big Blue. How is that business performing today? Is it still a big chunk of the pie for Meta and an important piece of the business?
Sure. So Meta recently, so a few quarters ago, they decided to not share anymore the number of users specific for Facebook. They only share the users for all of their apps together. But until then, and still now for the whole core base, you can still see that you have healthy growth in terms of users. So it's somewhere around mid-single digits quarter over quarter. And Big Blue, is, if we call it that, is still growing. And the reason why it's still growing, because in the West, it's saturized, right? But in other countries in the world, people still use it a lot, and even like younger people or people from my age use it often for marketplace, for groups, for stuff like that. So it's really popular. So it has more transitioned into a more private environment than the public town square, if you will, where it started off as first. So it's still growing. It's still a big piece of Meta's business, but both Instagram and WhatsApp are becoming bigger in terms of like just the whole pie. But yeah, Big Blue is still important. It's still where CPMs are one of the highest. And if you want to reach a mature audience, if you're an advertiser, that's the place to go. So for me, the most important thing when it comes to Facebook or any other of their assets is users, so user retention or user growth. At some point, user growth we must expect it's like now 3.3 billion daily active users, and they can't operate in China. So basically, plus 70% of the whole population that has access to internet uses one of Facebook's properties daily. So at some point, we must expect this to kind of stabilize. But until it's still growing and it's not falling, I'm very positive also on that part of the business, which is key in a way.
Yeah, it seems like for years and years and years now, Big Blue Facebook has climbed the wall of worry, seemingly
Yeah.
every quarter. But the one that's more exciting even, or the two that are more exciting, and don't worry, listeners, we'll get to artificial intelligence, we'll get to AR and the new Ray-Ban glasses and all the exciting stuff. But we want to hit on the stuff that might be more near to midterm. And one of those things is WhatsApp. We're seeing after maybe a decade after the acquisition, or I can't remember exactly when that was. Maybe it was, 5 years after the acquisition, people are saying, well, they don't even make any revenue off this thing. And if you go from then to today, it seems like we're starting to finally bear some of that fruit. So can you talk us through that and what potential you see with WhatsApp and how that can be monetized over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah. So with WhatsApp, the reason why Meta didn't monetize it until let's say the last 2 years ago is because everything else was on fire. So Instagram was growing, Facebook was growing. They had a lot of growth drivers, and they didn't need to pull the growth driver of WhatsApp for revenue. So WhatsApp continued to grow as a product. Usage continues to grow. What I find really interesting is this year we had on multiple calls, Mark mentioned that one of the fastest growing region for WhatsApp is actually the US. So this is like shocking for a lot of people, because they find it to be highly penetrated in the Western markets, but it's clearly not the case. So WhatsApp is continuing to grow in terms of users. It's also probably the biggest, most important commerce/communication asset in India. So everything that is related to commerce goes via WhatsApp in India, and also in Latin America and other countries, other regions in the world. So, and in terms of monetization, so we got some hints that WhatsApp is over $10 billion in annual dollars in run rate. So because they monetize it via click to ads, so these are basically ads, and then they also charge a small fee for brands or companies communicating with clients. And the biggest opportunity for WhatsApp, in my view, is going to be in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, where you will finally be able to monetize this feature of WhatsApp, which is companies communicating with clients. And the way they're going to do that is via chatbot, LLM, whatever we want to call it. Because the biggest reason for limited adoption of WhatsApp communication between businesses and consumers was the human labor cost. So in the eastern regions, because labor is cheaper, companies were adopting the model of I can have a person dedicated to answering WhatsApp questions, but in the West, this was too expensive. And now that you have LLMs basically taking care of customer service, having higher satisfaction rates in some use cases than humans, you can imagine that Western companies will be very much inclined to adopt those agents to increase conversion on ads, or to even open up new revenue streams, which are basically customer service revenue streams. Just for an interesting number, so the call center industry, right, which is something that WhatsApp can now target with LLMs, is $500 billion per year. So this is a number that is shocking to me, and this is only like third-party call centers. So we're not talking about customer services that companies have inside their so in-house services, right? So for the first time with LLMs and WhatsApp, Meta can now not only get ad budgets, but can actually get sales budgets. And I think WhatsApp is a really key driver for Meta for the next 3 to 5 years, and even longer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, especially here in the Western markets, iMessage is kind of the most popular just because of the popularity of the iPhone relative to Android operating systems. And so iMessage is really, it seems like it'd be something that's hard to monetize from Apple. And a lot of people probably think the same with WhatsApp. But from what I understand, and I'm not a common WhatsApp user, it's more of a social experience, right? Beyond just peer-to-peer messaging. And if I'm not mistaken, there's also a lot more business involvement, correct?
Correct. Yeah. It's much more it's much more also it's much more a product that can be used for commerce as well. Because in India, basically commerce goes via that. So in Latin America, you haul a taxi, you communicate with drivers, you actually do everything with WhatsApp. So it's much more. So as Apple likes this privacy and stuff like that, it's quite limiting to what they can do with the product. Even though like WhatsApp is encrypted and everything, right? It's much more open to being a more flexible platform that can do more things than just send text.
Yeah, and speaking as someone who's used both platforms, iMessage doesn't seem to get many updates except for, I guess, some new emojis, and WhatsApp seems to have way more robust features. So it's quite interesting that perhaps this is not a priority for Apple, and maybe it shouldn't be because they got to focus on the hardware stuff. But for Meta, WhatsApp could be one of the top priorities, and you could see them even with and I agree with Ryan, iMessage in the US has an incredibly strong moat. But even with that, the data that you're seeing, the data that Zuckerberg and all the other people are saying on their conference calls is that WhatsApp is growing extremely quickly in North America. So I wonder how long that can continue and if WhatsApp can eventually dethrone iMessage. Do you ever think that's possible, or is that part of your thesis? I guess any thoughts on that before we move on to Instagram?
Yeah, I think it is possible because if you think about it, like who are so the most native users in the US of WhatsApp, at least at first, were people that are immigrants, came to the US, are working, and then they have families in other parts of the world. And over the years, more and more people will come to the US, work there, and want to have a communication line with their family. So as long as that trend is there, you have this tailwind for WhatsApp, business specific. And also, like, just to add one more point in terms of monetization, we are very early in terms of monetization of WhatsApp. So I often like analyze former interviews with former employees and other customers, suppliers, whatever. And the thing about WhatsApp is I read it from an interview with a former Meta employee. He explained that the cultures between Meta and WhatsApp were very distant. So Meta kind of left WhatsApp for years to just do their thing, but now in the last 2 years, because they need more growth drivers from other parts of their business, so not just the big blue and Instagram, Meta infiltrated WhatsApp and decided, okay, now is the time we're going to pull on the levers and pull in more growth and pull in more revenue. So you can see a extremely higher focus on WhatsApp in the last 2 years, and we're going to see it even more in the coming years.
Okay, let's quickly shift gears to Instagram. There was a point, I'd say maybe 2 years ago, maybe a little longer now, where it seemed like Instagram was a bit at risk. So there was the rise of TikTok, short form content in general. It was really TikTok at the time, and they were being hit with the advertising drop off from the, I believe it was the iOS changes. So it was kind of a double whammy there. And I think a lot of people, a lot of investors were concerned that this growing cash cow for Meta was maybe seeing some heightened competition and at risk in terms of durability. But it seems like they've completely reinvented themselves here. I guess, how have they done that? What does Instagram look like today? And is this still a big growth driver for Meta?
So you're right. A few years ago, the notion was, that TikTok is basically eating their lunch and that they will be a platform for pictures, which in the end nobody will use, right? And when Instagram tried to reinvent it and start more video content and more content from from people you don't know, right? Not just your family and friends. We saw backlash on social media saying, no, we don't want this, we want to keep the old Instagram and all that stuff. But in the end, if you listen to, Adam Mosseri, who's the head of Instagram, or Mark or whatever, they just explained, look, yeah, people, they didn't say it like that, but bluntly, but in a way, they said people are talking that they want the old version, but when we analyze their actions, which we can see, they actually want more videos and they're spending more time on videos. So it's actually, it's a similar playbook that Meta has done over the years, similar to, if you remember Snapchat, which came out with stories. Everybody said, oh, this is like the next killer of Instagram. And then Meta just copied the feature, and they didn't kill Snapchat, right? But they stopped. So the growth of Snapchat stopped drastically because, the thing for Instagram is that they need to copy features that are interesting, that are engaging for users, and make sure that it's on their platform so users don't have a high intent to switch platforms, right? So yes, the younger audience and teens and everybody loves TikTok and goes there, but if you look at data from the last few years, they're not getting any like big growth drivers from young adults or other demographics, right? And that's very valuable for Meta because if it means that in the end TikTok becomes similar to Snapchat, which is basically for Mark's testing playground to see which features work, and for to have low income users because they're still teenagers, they don't have much purchasing power, for them to just play around, and then when they get older they come to Instagram. That's a perfect scenario for Instagram in a way. So it's still, from a user perspective, from a revenue perspective, and from an engagement perspective, Instagram actually became stronger because of TikTok, because because they introduced video and they introduced third-party content. They now have much higher engagement, which leads to selling them more ads and having higher CPMs. So it's actually a quite classic playbook for Meta over the years that they have done. So similarly here.
Yeah, it seems like there was a point in time when people thought of social medias as these sort of this trendy industry, almost like fashion, where it's like something's popular in the moment and then it disappears. And there were points where it seemed like Meta or Facebook way back when was at risk of that. The mobile shift was a big one where people thought Facebook wouldn't be able to adapt. Um, Short form video, they've very successfully rolled out Reels. I guess my question to you is, how much confidence does it give you that there have been all these shifts in consumption trends for content and media, and Meta's still at the top?
Yeah, extreme confidence, because we also have to remember we had Be Real, we had Clubhouse, we had multiple of this, kind of experiments trying to take over what Meta has. And the only real competitor that emerged in the last 10 years, if you will, is TikTok. But with TikTok, we have to remember this is not a small startup. So TikTok spent billions, tens of billions of dollars to get to this scale, and they were financed by ByteDance, which is a huge corporation in China, right? So it's not like yes, a good idea for a new social media company can just pop up and we were going to take over the incumbents. Not at all. You have to spend tens of billions of dollars to even have a chance. And the question is also, if we didn't have the pandemic, would TikTok be at this size? I doubt it, because the pandemic was really the driver for us consumers to be bored and start looking for where I can get entertainment content, and TikTok was the place to go. So yeah, it's I believe that you will have multiple tries on social media, but unless Meta starts doesn't continue to innovate, then you have a problem. But if they continue to innovate, I don't see anybody taking their throne. Besides, yeah, of course, they have a big competitor right now, which is TikTok for sure.
Yeah, one follow-up on, or actually two, these are some questions from Twitter, on Instagram. They said, and they're referring to you when I say that, they said, ask him about Threads monetization And then someone else said, ask him about Meta giving up vertical integration with Instagram shops. Maybe
Mhm.
anything important you think from both of those questions?
Sure. For Threads, again, the playbook similar. We want to build a billion user base business, and then we want to monetize it. Although there are reports out there that Meta is um, actually looking to monetize it in the next year already. So this would be, where it's still like around 300 million to 500 million active users. So this would be a change. But Threads is still growing. Meta is putting it in their flywheel, and if you have an asset in their flywheel, it's hard for them not to grow it. So I think Threads, for at least a few years, it's not going to be that big to be that important for Meta, but it is another asset which you can count on to give you a few billion in revenue in the coming years. When it comes to the shopping integration, so Meta tried with shopping, but because it's such a big business, so their culture is if you don't see quick results, they put the project on hold. And they did that with shopping. And I actually think it's really the right move because Meta is so you have TikTok, which is now pushing, the social commerce. You have the Chinese players who are doing similar. You will now have LLMs who will be pushing into this commerce space and stuff like that. But the real problem is that in the West we have a different consumer behavior than the behavior is in Asia and China, where consumers are more inclined to social commerce. But what Meta is doing is smart. So they're basically looking at it and saying, okay, we have all the products, all the features ready, and let TikTok spend the money to change consumer behavior. And when they do, we'll be ready to turn on the switch and basically also offer it to our users. So in a way, it's a smart strategy because oftentimes they showed over the years that they don't have to be the first one to then dominate the feature or the space. So yeah, that's what I know from the shopping integration part, which is they didn't get the results they wanted to in a short time frame when they pushed for it. So
Let's talk artificial intelligence. Maybe we can talk to whatever they're doing, but how are they monetizing these new AI breakthroughs today? What are they working on? Are they getting a good ROI on all the spending? Maybe referencing I think they call it Llama, all
yeah.
those LLM stuff that they seem to be investing heavily in.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Yellow Brick Investing. Yellow Brick is an aggregator of the best stock pitches across the internet. By tracking thousands of blogs, newsletters, fund letters, podcasts, and more, they collect and summarize the best stock pitches and bring them to you in a single place. If you're a regular listener, you know that we use Yellow Brick every single week here on the podcast to discover new investments or just find reports on companies we've already heard of. Try it for yourself. Simply go to joinyellowbrick.com/chitchat and search a company or ticker you are interested in. You are bound to find a great report on just about any company. That's joinyellowbrick.com/chitchat.
Heads up, folks. Interest rates are falling, but you can still lock in a 6% or higher yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment grade corporate bonds on public.com. You might want to act fast because your yield isn't locked in until the time of purchase. Lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account only at public.com/chitchat stocks.
Yeah. Okay, so here we have a big topic for Meta specific. I wrote about it, I tweet often about it. Social media is and will be the fastest company or industry to gain profits from Gen AI, besides from semiconductors and cloud providers. And the reason is because they have an auction model. So that means that if your ads are better performing, the market will increase the price of your ads, right? And so let's take a step back and see what Meta is doing and why they're doing it in terms of AI. So first, they're developing Llama and they're open sourcing Llama. So this is the foundation LLM model. And one of the key reasons why they're doing it is because they know that in a few years, social media is going to be the biggest consumer of LLMs, because you will have to use LLMs for ad targeting and ad creative. So basically making the ads. And you will also have to use it for content creation, which is basically two parts of the business. So it's the whole business is going to be dependent on the LLM. And they know that, if we don't develop this and if we don't open source it for others to help us develop this, we will end up in a situation where maybe you have OpenAI, you have Anthropic, you have maybe Google, and at some point they will ask us, okay, now you have to pay for using the LLM. And so Meta's margin is at risk, if that would to happen. So they have to make sure that Llama and the foundation models are good enough for them to use it basically free. So they just pay the infrastructure costs, and they're not dependent on some other provider in the future. So this is the first part of what Meta is doing. The second part is GenAI, as we talked about, affects. Let's first look at the advertiser. So the advertiser gets better targeting because you can make hyper targeted ads, and the advertiser can use GenAI tools to make the ads better. What that means is that you can basically adapt in real time different formats of ads and see what's working best, right? And this is really valuable because this means that ads become really more effective. And at first, it increases their return on ad spend for advertisers, but in the end, it increases the CPMs, right? So this is basically revenue for Meta. And this is like also if you check what happens with advertisers if they do. So there was a survey, what happens to advertisers if they don't have to spend that much on ad creative, so on designers, on ad agencies, stuff like that. Most of the cost savings from that would go to increased ad budgets. Again, increasing revenue for Meta. So Meta is basically, in a few years, they will cut out most of the small marketing agencies that help with design, targeting, and stuff like that. It's becoming a black box where you will just say, this is my product, this is my, web page, catalog, whatever. Make ads, I want revenue, I want profits, whatever, right? And then the last part of why, so these are just short-term reasons for Meta to adopt Gen AI. The last part is user engagement. So if you have better content, if you have more sticky content, helping content creators create it, you will also have higher user retention. Again, meaning at the end you will have higher revenue because you will be able to sell more ads. So yeah, let's pause here because there are still a lot of things where we can talk about in terms of the AI.
I think that's very comprehensive. It makes sense that they would be one of the first ones to really benefit on the monetization side from the AI investments. I guess what kind we've seen CapEx grow really quickly, and actually recently you wrote an article on this. It wasn't particularly to Meta, but about the discrepancy we're seeing between a lot of the big CSPs and CapEx versus free cash flow. Do you think we see any sort of contraction in return on invested capital for Meta in the short term because of the increased CapEx related to AI?
Yeah. So for Meta, it's the good thing about Meta is that most of the CapEx spending that we're talking about are basically NVIDIA servers, NVIDIA GPUs, if you want to be more specific, right? And the good thing about Meta is that even before the LLMs took over, because their platform shifted from friends and family content towards I want to see more content from people that I don't know, you had to start using a GPU instead of a CPU because you had multiple. So the matrix of your options from a recommendation engine spiraled extremely high, right? So Meta had to use GPUs already before, and even if LLMs turn out to be nothing real and a fad, whatever, which I don't believe to be so, but let's just play with that thought. The only thing that happens to Meta is that they kind of pulled forward maybe 3 years of infrastructure spending that they would have to use it anyway because they're growing in terms of user spend, user time, and stuff like that. So for Meta, and this is also mentioned on their call, their CFO mentioned it, their infrastructure spending is quite, it's nice because it's really flexible. They can use it on multiple fronts, right? But we're also going to see new revenue for Meta because of the LLM. So so far we talked about, what does it improve in terms of the existing products, but you're also going to see new products. So you are going to have AI agents which will help businesses and creators. So this will be the first thing to see. So what does this mean? This means that the creator will be able to have their persona on Instagram, and it will be able to talk to users, so to consumers, and Meta will be the first. So it's the first time where they will be able to charge, also influencers a part of their revenue or something that they're, selling or whatever, right? Because the influencer will help each influencer will help their own persona, and similar on a company level as well. And also a new source of revenue for Meta is also Meta AI. So this is like, the LLM similar to ChatGPT. And here we can see, Perplexity, OpenAI going into the search ads, and we're going to see similar Meta going into search ads. So not just having top of the funnel ads, which they have so far, but also bottom funnel ads, which are basically Google ads.
Makes sense. I guess no follow-ups there, but is there anything else, any other ways that Meta benefits from AI that we haven't discussed yet?
There's also, if you want to talk about AR, right? So Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses. AI seems to be the unlock of the product, so making it more useful, easier to navigate, and stuff like that. So this is another part. And then with Llama, they also have it's open source, but if you're a big user, so if you have, I think it's over 500 million users, something like that. So basically the cloud providers also have to pay a portion of the revenue that they make from products that are based on Llama. So this is only for the big guys, but this is, yes, it's small, but it can be a few billion in a few years, I would imagine so.
Is the most direct revenue contribution from AI, you may have already mentioned this, but do you think the most clear-cut, most immediate, I should say, revenue contribution from AI, would that be the advertising targeting efficiencies?
Yeah, so ad creative, so first helping on ads, making it more effective on targeting, and also WhatsApp, which we talked about before. So basically using these AI agents to start gathering, customer service revenue, call center revenue, stuff like that. So this would be the low-hanging fruit at first.
All right, you mentioned the Ray-Ban glasses. I don't want to confuse any of our listeners because I think they might only be popular among 16-year-olds at the moment, in case we have someone that's never seen these or heard of these before. What exactly is that? And maybe we can just hit on these quickly. Why do you think they've had such explosive growth over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses are basically, a pair of Ray-Bans in which Meta put in some tech, and you can take pictures with it, you can film, so from your glasses, And now with Gen AI, you can also navigate them. So you can use voice and say, Meta AI, can you translate what I'm seeing right now? Or can you take a picture? Or what's the time? So basically the basic use cases of LLMs. And they have become really popular lately because they're really attractive in terms of the price point. So it's $300 for the smart glasses. So it's not really that much more expensive than a normal pair of Ray-Ban glasses. And, people use them for, filming when they go outdoors or biking or whatever. So video is a part of it, but also surprisingly voice, in terms of like listening to podcasts and stuff like that. So it's like some even change their Apple Pods to basically start using Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses. And then again, the LLMs are really cool feature, and they're adding new capabilities to the LLM. So just recently they announced that you will have real-time translation. So you can have a person speak in front of you another language, and it will translate it in real time to you, right? So you can imagine that this is, and we're only talking about first steps, right? But this is the product as it is today. But I think in the next year you will see, much more capable and much more fun products. So Meta kind of hinted, their CTO Bosworth in an interview hinted that they're looking at something called the super sensoring glasses. And so glasses that basically hear and see what you see, and they become your assistant. So either via work, so you can imagine going to work, having the pair of glasses, because they can look at like normal glasses, they don't have to look like sunglasses, and it can memorize what you talk in a meeting, it can summarize it. So you not only have an assistant for online, which everybody is trying to do, so Apple and everybody else, but you can also have an assistant for real life stuff, right? And then you can drive to your home, and it says, oh, you remember your wife told you to pick up the groceries, you need this and that and that, right? So it can be an assistant wherever you go. And this is not like a big, it doesn't take for a big technological revolution to make this happen. You just have to add a few more sensors to it, so it will probably be at a 300 to 400 price point. And I think this will be a killer mainstream product, because a lot of people want an assistant in their life, but it's too expensive, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. As a human, I might get a little bit nervous about all this stuff because I don't want people taking pictures of me constantly, but
Yeah.
that's not a topic for an investor. I guess we'll see how much. I don't know. It's just going to be really interesting if there's ever going to be one of these AR glasses that becomes truly, truly mainstream, and maybe these Ray-Ban type glasses could be. You mentioned in a tweet that you said Meta is coming after Google. Perhaps a little bit of a provocative tweet, trying to get some discussions going. Why do you think this? And what sort of potential do you think they have coming after the Google search market?
Yeah. So this is something that we mentioned before. So Meta AI, right? They're integrating the search into all of their products. So the Meta, you can use it in Instagram, you can use it in WhatsApp, in Facebook. And the reason why I said that is because now, you have users. So Meta, basically the signal that they had is you're watching X and maybe you're interested in Y, right? But now they get data from, so you can type in, I don't know, I want to buy a bike. What's the best bike for, I don't know, off-road or stuff like that? And it can answer the question. And with it, Meta suddenly starts to get intent, right? So you get searches with high intent, which is something that was mostly reserved for Google and Amazon as well. But now with this integration and with LLMs, people can start asking questions in their apps, and Meta gets the signal. And with it, it also becomes really attractive for advertisers, because it's one of the first companies yes, we can talk about Google and YouTube and stuff like that, but that has really, with it, can get a really big scale in terms of the full funnel marketing, right? So they can target somebody on the top funnel with Instagram, with WhatsApp, with Facebook, and then they can also target the high intent searches and basically offer advertisers, which they already have all the relationships, basically an upsell of their services. And I think this is really like, for Meta, it doesn't have to be, Google makes a huge number in terms of search. So the revenue for search is huge, but Meta, even to take a few billions, this is where it all starts. And, it's not just going to be Meta, it's also going to be Perplexity. It's going to be ChatGPT, so OpenAI and all others. But Meta is positioned well because they have relationship with existing advertisers, and they're the only one that can offer the full funnel marketing. So, yeah.
Okay, another tweet you had that I guess I seem to just get my Meta news from your Twitter account. But you said Meta plans to build a $10 billion subsea cable spanning across the world. I guess my question is why?
All right, folks, if you're a regular listener to Chit Chat Stocks, then you know that we use finchat.io daily. FinChat is the complete stock research platform for fundamental investors. They have robust financial data on more than 100,000 stocks globally, including company-specific segment and KPI data. Want to see Google's Cloud's quarterly revenue growth? FinChat's got it. Like to track PayPal's take rate? They've got that too. And they recently added sell-side conferences and insider transactions to the platform. Best part is it's completely free to sign up. However, if you want to get unlimited data, you can use our link finchat.io/chitchat to get 15% off any paid plans. The link will be in the show notes.
Yeah. So this is not something new. In fact, if you check, Meta already owns 16, so partially owns 16 sub cables. And the reason for doing this is because, so here are my speculation on why the main reasons are, right? One of the reasons is that if you own the cable, you can prioritize your services to get better bandwidth. You can get, so you increase your quality of your product. But it also, if you own it, you become less dependent on others. Because, also Microsoft and Google specific, they own a lot of subsea cables. But more importantly, I think it's also a hedge, in a way, if you will, from Elon Musk and Starlink. Because, Meta doesn't want a world where instead of telecom providers, the only two providers of internet in the world are Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, right? So they don't want to have kind of this world. So this is basically a hedge, which I think is a smart move, because this 10 billion that they're going to invest, this is not like in 1 year. This is going to be a multi-year project. So it's going to be maybe, I don't know, 2 billion per year or even less for you to build out this cable, right? And then another thing is as well, speculations are that it's going to be a cable that's going to go from the from the East Coast to South Africa to India, Australia, and back to the West Coast, right? And this is from a geopolitical standpoint. These are zones that are less risky in the world. So it doesn't have Middle East, it doesn't have Southeast China, South China Sea. And there's also like one important country for Meta to have a direct connection, which is India. India is Meta's biggest market. So more than 500 billion users use WhatsApp. More than 350 million use Instagram. TikTok is banned there. So basically, Meta is taking over the whole market there. And for them strategically to have a strong connection and with it quality of product in India is really important. And if you bake in AI, which is gonna require, for you to have a good internet connection, this is quite important because a lot of in the third world countries, the internet connection is low, and you even have products like WhatsApp Lite and stuff like that that takes less space and less bandwidth and stuff like that. So I think it's a strategic position for Meta, again, to not be dependent on anybody when they build out their future.
Yeah, it's funny you say they have 500 billion users there, because someone might go, well, how penetrated are they in that market? But that means they still have 1 trillion users left to go after. And it seems like for Meta, they are primed, or at least they have the most potential to monetize if India's GDP per capita keeps growing at a 5, 6, 7, 8% rate per year. But let's move on to another topic, and that is the work culture at Meta. I think for myself, I think maybe a lot of investors out there, it flipped over the last few years from being almost extremely negative on a cost front, where they seem to not be focusing on ROI in some cases, and maybe let that not be a focus, to being it flipped to being something that you could even praise them for. They brought their employee count down. They said they are seeing much better efficiencies there. So what do you think happened with that? Is Zuck still in, as they say, founder mode? And do you believe that is an advantage for them versus, say, someone like Alphabet, who has a CEO that's not the founder, or someone compared to Amazon that, again, Bezos is retired, seems to be in yacht mode? What do you think about that, and how that can help with Zuck leading the charge here and seem to be extremely focused on a lot of these new products?
Yeah, so for Zuck, he said it multiple times, Meta is the thing that he wants to build out, and he's still young, so he sees his main productivity age coming up, and he wants to build the legacy in Meta, not in some other company, not having 3 more companies, 4 more companies, whatever. So all his focus is on Meta, and this is a big advantage for Meta shareholders. But what did change in 2022 was that Mark saw that because of the high growth in the pandemic and employment, stuff like that, the company became too bulk, right? So they had too much employees, the decision making was slower. And again, reading from an interview with a few former employees, they all explained that Mark figured out that he's too far away from the product. So before he was closer to the product, now he's too far away, and he decided, no, this is not the right thing because I want to get closer. So he decided to cut, in all honesty, he was the only big tech company that really cut deep. So it was like a 30% cut in the workforce. All others were like 6, 5, 10-ish, right? So it's like the only real big tech company that got fit was Meta in that period. And he noticed that when they have less, middle management, when he's close to the product, they're delivering faster, they're executing faster, and it's actually becoming a better company for shareholders and for employees. And another thing which was interesting, right? Meta in 2022 was they weren't really great for attracting talent because of their stock price, because of everything that was going on at Meta. But after they started open sourcing Llama and stuff like that, they're one of the most sought out AI research labs right now, close to OpenAI, right? And the reason for it, because AI researchers want, so developers, engineers, they want their work to be open source because it gives them recognition with their peers. So it's a really smart strategy for Meta to attract talent, especially in the AI field, because they can work on open source, and then Meta can harness them for them to also work in internal projects and monetizable projects. So in terms of the culture, Meta has done a big shift, but I think the main kind of advantage, benefit of Meta is definitely Mark. He's super focused, super motivated, and this is the first time where Meta is big enough where they can be one of the big players that also participates in this technology revolution, because they were too small when the iPhone came out. So when it was mobile, they were too small, and now they're big enough for them to be able to be the leading company here. And, Mark is really motivated, especially if he goes against Apple, because he doesn't like it. He doesn't like Tim Cook. He doesn't like Apple, because he mentioned in a podcast that Meta would be twice as profitable if it wasn't for the gatekeepers like Apple and Google limiting what they can develop and what they can do. Which is quite telling, right? Because Meta already makes over 55 billion per year. So, Mark is extremely focused, and I think it's like investors should praise having a CEO like that.
Yeah, I think that Zuckerberg's or Meta's workforce reduction in, 2022, it seemed like it gave every other big tech company the green light to do it themselves, and they all kind of followed suit. And maybe it was like a nice cop out for them if they were thinking about doing it anyways. But let's shift gears a little bit here. We've got maybe a couple questions left. I guess one that comes to mind for me, the company is called Meta. We don't hear the metaverse talked about quite as much anymore. There was the buzzword for like 2 quarters of 2022, I think. What has happened here, and where do you think the metaverse? What do you think the metaverse looks like in 5 years? Are they spending more on this? Is this something that they've kind of pushed back a little? Where does it kind of sit in their initiatives?
Yeah. So I actually think the name change, looking in hindsight, was a good idea. And it's not because, of the metaverse taking off or whatever, but just because if you recall, when the company was named Facebook, I think there wasn't a week where we had a negative piece on the company in the media, attacking it for, I don't know, Cambridge Analytica, for other scandals, for other stuff. And since the name change, it has become more neutral, and people still don't like the term Facebook, but when you ask them about Meta, a lot of people don't even know. They're like, oh, okay, this is some cool company or whatever, right? So the name change, if not for anything else, has changed the perception in some, which is useful, because it wasn't a great brand perception, to be honest. In terms of the metaverse, so recently they shifted to spend more of the capex, if you will, towards projects that will deliver ROI sooner. So inside, Reality Labs, they shifted gears towards closer to the project that will deliver sooner, projects like Ray-Ban smart glasses, which is seeing traction, super sensoring glasses and stuff like that. So for Meta, it has never been just, the metaverse has to take off in the concept that Mark has presented it. It's enough for them for AR to take off. And I think AR is actually the biggest opportunity for them. And they had to deliver all that kind of, a lot of their capex had to go in those directions for them to make the strides that they did in AR. If you recall the last Meta Connect event in September, they announced Orion, right? Which is still a product in prototype, but it's the product that they showcased, which are fully AR smart glasses, right? And I encourage everyone, if they don't know, check out the videos from the event to see what this product is all about. But to me, it's the first time where I see from any big tech a really big technological change, innovation in the last maybe 15 years. Because honestly, Apple hasn't done much. They have just, Tim Cook is great in terms of like giving buybacks, dividends, financial engineering, stuff like that. But in terms of a product innovation and not just changing the size of the camera, he hasn't done much, to be honest. And, we are 12 years from the death of Steve Jobs. So Tim Cook will have to deliver in the next cycle when the technology changes innovation, and we are yet to see that. And from Meta, you see that innovation very clearly, and the event actually was perceived positive in terms of like investors, the media, stuff like that, because it really showcased what they have been working on all these years.
Yeah, if you look at Vision Pro, I think we're less than 12 months from that formal release, and we can almost conclusively say it's a giant flop. So far, yeah, Meta seems to be doing much better in that category, although it's still an extremely early stage product category. As we wrap up here, let's connect things back to the actual stock. How are you looking at it for the next, say, 5 years as a shareholder? It's done extremely well over the last few years. What are your expectations, and maybe what is the risks and a post-mortem that you could look back and say, okay, it didn't work out holding Meta stock?
Yeah. So I have been a shareholder of Meta for quite some time. I bought it, I think, in 2017. And then I added to it multiple times. I added the most in 2022, where at some point, your thesis is like, am I an idiot or is the market really this wrong, right? And thank God I stuck to my thesis and, got rewarded for it. But if you look at if you cast aside the 2020 75% drop in stock price, it's not like extremely overperformed any other big tech name, to be honest, right? So for me, it's still my biggest position. I still look at it quite attractively because yes, it's valued at 27 times this year's earnings. But if you strip out the 20 billion in Metaverse spent, it's under 20. And for me, the Metaverse spend is it's like a call option. So in 3 years, either this stuff works out and they're going to see some return and you're going to see the market price, the Reality Labs not zero or negative, but positive in value, or it doesn't work out and Meta suddenly, their core business suddenly has 20 billion more in profits than it had, right? So it's like a call option at this point because you're getting it for free in the market. The risk, of course, there are risks to this. My biggest one would be, the first thing I look when Meta reports is always the user number. If we start to see users decline, that would be a problem for me. And that would be the point where I would kind of, really revalue my thesis and see where this is going and why the users are dropping. I have high, expectations and with it confidence that they will deliver in terms of increased ROI on ads, with it increased revenue. But the only thing that they need to keep an eye on is the users, because as long as the users are there, the advertisers will follow. This is how this works, right? So it's like, for me, that's the most important metric. I'm also monitoring carefully TikTok, but I think at this point, and with all the, even if it doesn't get banned or whatever, or sell off, or it's still something that is out there and has advertisers on their edge. So we saw that in this year, many advertisers didn't want to commit teams to work on TikTok because they said, what if it gets banned in 6 months and I committed, my budgets, my teams to learn about TikTok, right? So it doesn't make sense. So for me, it's just Meta has to, keep the users, and if they keep the users, I think they'll be fine. And I think they have a lot of opportunities with Gen AI, with products like WhatsApp, even commerce. At some point, social commerce will take off in the West as well. And there are only a few companies that are positioned well. And the best one is Meta. besides from the Chinese players, right? You also have like maybe an asset like Pinterest, maybe even Snapchat, but besides that, you don't have anything, right? So it's like there's a reason why you see Amazon recently doing deals with Meta for advertising and doing deals with Snapchat and Pinterest. And there's a reason why this project is reported to the CEO of Amazon directly, right? So everybody is monitoring, because once, this is the old saying where the trend is slowly, and then it starts to grow fast. If TikTok with its subsidies changes the user behavior, it will be a different e-commerce market in a few years. So everybody needs to be ready for that. And Meta is actually greatly positioned for that. Even in Gen AI, right? Just to add the last point, in Gen AI, they're probably one of the rare companies from the big tech guys that isn't in danger. Gen AI is not going to create a new social media, but it might create the fact that you will see more content being created by AI, which actually might benefit Meta, because they will be able to make even more sticky content and addictive content.
Yeah, I even forgot that TikTok
Yeah.
is supposed to get banned. I guess that could be another positive for them. Ryan, it seems like you have a follow-up before we close out here.
No, I was just gonna say, looking back over all the different iterations and the evolutions of social media over the last 15, 20 years, what a durable network effect it seems like Meta has. I guess, last question. Anyone that wants to hear more from you, read more of your content, where can they do that?
Yeah, so they can go on uncoveralpha.com. So I write a newsletter on Substack. I write about big tech companies, small caps, mostly technology companies in the AI, cloud, and ed tech space. So they can go there, and they can also, check me on Twitter if they want to. You guys will probably put in the links so they can easily access it. So.
Yep, we'll do. We will have those all in the show notes here. So if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get podcasts, go ahead, check those out. Brett, you want to take us out here?
Oh, you forgot the disclosure? How to say it?
I
guess
did.
I can say it. All right, let's close things out here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. As a reminder, we are not financial advisors. Anything we say on the show is not formal advice or recommendation. Ryan, I, or any podcast guest may hold securities discussed in this podcast, may have held them in the past, and may buy, sell, or hold them in the future. Thank you to Rihard. Check out all his stuff. Make sure to check out all our sponsors as well. FinChat, Public, Yellowbrick Investing. And we'll see everyone next time.